Good evening, this is Chrissy Green. Thank you for joining me for another video tutorial here for the Photography for Beginners editing group. Uh, Tonight's probably more of a fun game than it is a tutorial. I'm going to show you something that you've probably seen on the internet maybe a year or two or five ago, and then not a lot of anymore. And it's something you might not ever use again, but it's just a way to have a little bit of fun for a change. So what I have here is this image that I got from pexels.com, and I'd like you to play along with me if you're so inclined. You do need Photoshop for this. Um, but if you want to play along, I'm going to actually put the link for this image in the comments. I encourage you to download the image, follow along on the tutorial, and just have something fun come out of this. And let's get started. Right away, I guess I'll tell you what we're doing. You've probably seen little planets. People have made it in Photoshop where they take a scene similar to this one and they turn it into a tiny little world that looks like it's floating out in the middle of space. And this is the kind of image you want for it. It doesn't have to be city. It could be a landscape, of course. You need it to have three distinct areas, though, to work properly. So in this one, I have water, building, and sky. It could be grass, trees, and sky, but you do need to have those three layers in order for this to work. This image will work just fine. The other thing you need to do is to make sure that you have a straight horizon, because when we do the wrap that turns this into a sphere, this has to line up with this. So that's the other thing to look out for to save yourself some needless cloning later. So I'm going to bring this image on over into Lightroom. Here we have it here. Um, because the final image that we're going to end up with is really not based in reality, it is more or less a fantasy shot, I'm free to creatively punch this up in any way that I want. So I'm going to bring in a little bit of clarity, a lot of vibrance there. That looks nice. I'm going to bring up the shadows just a little bit. Now I know I said you needed Photoshop for this, and here I am in Lightroom. I just brought it into Lightroom because it's the easiest way for me to, play with the colors that I wanted to. I also need to straighten these buildings up because, as you can see, this particular image does have some lens distortion on the sides, and it's just it's easy for me to pop it into Lightroom first. My blues in the sky are a little too blue. Change those blues to make them a little purplier. Maybe make the purplies a little pinker. Totally unrealistic, but totally going to work for what I want to do with it. And then just going to go down to my lens corrections and straighten those buildings out. Now this is going to stretch them a little bit because I have to adjust it so much, but that's okay because the actual technique I'm going to be doing in Photoshop is going to be stretching them too. So, like I said, we're not really going for realistic here, but something a little bit straighter. That looks good. So then when I've got that done, I'm going to pop it on over into Photoshop and show you what we're doing. The formula for this to work, it's actually called polar coordinates. In order for polar coordinate to work, your image has to be, it has to be a perfect square, but it has to be a distorted square that starts from twice as wide as it is tall. So to do that, it's got to get cropped. And you want to choose where you're beginning and ending your crop in a realistic place. I don't want to start with half a building because then when it joins up to the other side, I'm going to have a half a building. So you want your crop to make sure that you get as much sky and water as you can. You see, I'm just trying to make sure I get the bottom of that building. Bring this one in so that I get the side of that building. I don't have any half buildings in there. For custom, I just have to, your width is your first one. So I'll say 2 wide versus 1 tall. There we go. So now, if I get that building, by holding shift, I can drag this back and forth all I want, and I'm only ever going to have twice as wide as I do tall. It will keep that locked in for me. So then this is the image that I take into Photoshop. As you can see, I was playing with the idea there. So now here's the image that I brought into Photoshop. So we have a rectangle. It's in the correct proportions. Now I've got to turn this into a square. So to do that, I'm going to go to image size. Now, a lot of times you will have this little bracket in here. For this, you want to make sure that that's turned off. With this turned off, if I add to the height, Photoshop is going to try to keep all of the proportions the same, and it will add to the width as well. So by turning that off, I can adjust these numbers independent of each other, and I just have to make sure that the width is the same number as I have for my height. And then I will say OK. So now I have my image exactly the way I need it. It is a square, but it's a stretched square. It's been stretched twice as tall as it originally was. I'm just going to unlock that layer so that I can flip it upside down. So I do that by clicking the little lock. Control T will give me my transform box, and then I just have to right click and say flip vertical. And then hit enter to accept that. Now if I had left this right side up, it would have still worked, but it would have ended up with the sky in the middle and the ocean on the outside. And that's the opposite of a planet. So our polar coordinates is hidden here under filter, distort, polar coordinates. And it's the easiest tool to use because you have 0 options in there whatsoever. Rectangular to polar, polar to rectangular. But we want that first one. So we're going to say OK. And it's going to take a minute just to render the effect for us. And there we have our finished result. We can obviously tweak this, maybe get a little bit of a crop. So to crop this in a perfect square, just go up here and instead of being on normal, go to fixed ratio. And we're doing a 1:1 ratio, which is a square. And to make sure that your world is in the middle, put your cursor dead center, click, but then hold Shift and Alt while you drag, and it will draw your square out right from the center there. And I'm just going to keep dragging until I get the tallest peak in. There we go. So then I'll go up to Image and Crop. And I think I would like this image to have the tall building on the top. So I am going to just go ahead and do a flip vertical on this one more time. And hit enter. Now where you have this seam that comes down, then it's just a matter of using your clone tool. Pardon, my graphics is having trouble there with this image. The image that I got from pexels.com, they are very large files. The great thing is they're also royalty free, commercial free use. You know, you're very free to download those images and play with them, and there's no you know, they're all under Creative Commons. So it's a wonderful place to get resource pictures if you're trying to learn how to do Photoshop or manipulating. I don't really have any images that would have worked for this, so it was great that I could go there and grab this image and use it and be able to use it in a tutorial to show you. So I don't have time in my video to finish doing all of the cloning. And my graphics card is, there we go. But once you clone out that seam, you end up with a really adorable look. I also did one with a winter scene. It was actually a lake. There's a cabin in there that you can barely see. And then I was working on the mountains and the landscape. And it just gives you these really adorable worlds. So go ahead and take the picture, play with the polar coordinates, use pictures of your own, see what happens when you do. Thanks for watching and have yourselves a really great night. Thanks.